Before we start, tell me which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are tuning in from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more crazy HOA and Karen stories that will leave your jaw on the floor. Now, let's dive into today's story. HOA ordered me to leave my grandfather's home. They didn't know I was a JAG officer. The house had been in my family for 3 generations. It sat at the end of a quiet street, half hidden by oak trees and a long stone fence that my grandfather built with his own hands. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, a symbol of hard work, discipline, and legacy. After my grandfather passed, the property was left to me. I was stationed overseas at the time, serving as a legal officer in the military, a JAG, Judge Advocate General. So when I finally returned home, I was eager to spend some time in the place that shaped so much of who I was. But peace and nostalgia were the last things I found waiting for me. When I pulled up the driveway that first week back, I noticed something odd right away. A new sign at the entrance of the street. Welcome to Cedar Ridge Estates, a managed HOA community. That wasn't there before. My grandfather's home had always been outside of any HOA jurisdiction. He'd actually fought to keep it that way decades ago when developers tried to buy out the area. So seeing that sign felt like an invasion. Over the next few days, things escalated fast. HOA letters started showing up in my mailbox, demands to pay deassociation dues, warnings about unauthorized fencing, and threats of fines for non-compliant property conditions. It was laughable at first, but then came the notice that made my blood boil. It was titled Final Eviction Warning. According to the letter, I was illegally occupying property that was now under the management of Cedar Ridge HOA. They claimed my title deed was outdated and that the land had been rezoned for development under their control. I had 10 days to vacate or they would take legal action. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with an overzealous neighborhood committee. This was corruption. I started digging. The HOA president, a woman named Denise, had a reputation for pushing homeowners around. She'd filed dozens of complaints against neighbors for petty things, a slightly faded mailbox, a flag hung incorrectly, even a garden gnome she called aesthetic disruption. But now she'd set her sights on my family's home. She'd partnered with a local developer trying to expand the HOA boundaries, illegally. Their plan was to force me out, annex my property, and flip the land for luxury homes. They thought I was just another quiet homeowner who'd roll over. They had no idea who they were dealing with. As a JAG officer, I'd spent years in military courts dealing with high-stakes property disputes, fraud, and abuse of authority. I'd seen every trick in the book, and I knew exactly how to fight back. The next morning, I began collecting evidence. I documented every letter, every visit, every word they said. Cameras went up on every corner of the property. When the so-called HOA inspector trespassed onto my land, I recorded him measuring my lawn with a tape measure and taking pictures of my porch. A week later, Denise herself showed up at my door. She was flanked by 2 men wearing matching blazers with Cedar Ridge Compliance Team printed on their name tags. They were filming the interaction, clearly trying to intimidate me. They handed me a clipboard and announced they were there to conduct a property seizure. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside, let them wander into the yard, and watched as they took pictures, scribbled notes, and threatened to call county enforcement. What they didn't know was that my home security cameras were capturing everything, including the moment one of them broke my gate latch. Once they left, I made a call, not to the police, but to a few contacts in the county clerk's office. Within hours, I had copies of every document the HOA had filed in their attempt to expand their reach. The zoning changes were bogus. The signatures, forged. They had falsified public records to try and claim ownership of private property. Now it wasn't just an HOA dispute. It was a criminal offense. The next morning, I drove down to the county courthouse in uniform. The clerks stood a little straighter when they saw the JAG insignia on my shoulder. Within a few hours, I had a court injunction freezing all HOA actions related to my property. Then I filed a full legal complaint, not as a private citizen, but as an officer of the military and an attorney licensed under federal law. I included evidence of fraud, trespassing, and harassment, naming the HOA president and her developer partner directly. Word spread quickly. The following weekend, the HOA held an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard it turned into chaos. Homeowners were furious. Many hadn't even known their dues were funding illegal expansion plans. By Monday morning, half the board had resigned. A few days later, the sheriff's department served warrants. Denise and her so-called compliance team were arrested for fraud and trespassing. The developer faced charges for falsifying zoning applications and bribery. The county immediately revoked Cedar Ridge's expansion permits. Every homeowner who'd been wrongly fined got their money back. As for me, I stood on my porch the next morning watching the Cedar Ridge estate sign being torn out of the ground. It was poetic. The same driveway my grandfather paved by hand was finally free from the people who tried to steal it. In the weeks that followed, a few neighbors came by to apologize for not stepping in sooner. I didn't hold it against them. Most of them were good people who had been manipulated by a few greedy few. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out the shed, I found an old photo of my grandfather standing in front of the house with his arm around my shoulder. I realized then that everything that I had done, all the hours, the paperwork, the legal battles, wasn't just about the land. It was about honoring his legacy. The home he built stayed in our name, and thanks to a few legal maneuvers, it always will. Now, whenever I sit on that porch at sunset, I think about how close they came to taking it all away, and how sometimes the quiet ones have the sharpest claws when pushed too far.